You're listening to the Place Northwest podcast, your digital resource for the latest insight and analysis on all things property in the northwest of England.
Hello, and welcome to the Place Northwest podcast series. I'm your host, Julia Hatmaker, and today we're taking a closer look at digital connections, specifically full fiber infrastructure, and we're going to bust a few myths along the way. To help break down full fiber infrastructure, including what it is, why it's important, and what is being done to improve it, I've brought along two experts, Dave Ferry, the head of enterprise sales at ITS Technology Group, and Lorna Rodgers, Assistant Director of Mayoral Program Delivery at Liverpool City Region Combined Authority. ITS builds networks and sells internet connections and has partnered with Liverpool City Region to help transform the region into a digital infrastructure power player. Dave, Lorna, welcome to the podcast. Dave, I'm going to have you start us out if that's okay. What is actually full fiber connection and why is it important?
So a lot of the internet connections in the UK today are based on copper wires, copper technology that was built to take telephone calls around the country at the advent of the first telephones being installed in people's houses, and that was about 100 years ago. And that technology has been adapted over time so that people can not just make telephone calls on those cables, but also access the internet. But it's not perfect for internet connections, and fibre optic is much better. The copper wires are a bit like a leaky water pipe, and the data falls out a bit over long distances on there. And there has been a bit of an interim solution where telecoms companies have moved fibre closer to the customer's premises, to generally sort of green cabinets in their street or at the end of their road, but the link from that cabinet to their house is still served over these old copper wires, and the longer those bits of copper are, the leakier they are. So as we build out full fibre, that takes fibre all the way from the internet, in simplistic terms, all the way to the customer's premises, whether that's a home or a business. And that gives a really good quality and really good throughput, and it's much more reliable as well. It doesn't fall over and break as often. And the connection, the data is sent as a beam of light from one end to the other of that piece of glass in that fibre optic cable, which gets that future-proof technology that's ready for the country to go on its next phase of evolution.
So why is that important, Lorna?
It's really, really important. Digital is just such an enabler, and it's part of our everyday life now. I think COVID really brought that to bear, didn't it, in terms of how people could switch to online and still continue to work, continue to communicate with their family and friends, access services. I think digital is such an unlocker of economic potential. So we in our region know how important it is for our businesses, but also for our residents to be able to have access to really fast, reliable, good connectivity.
And it strikes me too that this goes beyond just like, it's one of those things that has become so ingrained in our lives. Like, we're all living this digital life, and I have zero patience for a web page taking too long to load at this point, which is magnificent when you think about how I grew up in the time of dial-up, when it'd be like 30 minutes for something to load. So is that it really is kind of the way forward then, isn't it, Dave?
Yeah, of course it is. Absolutely. It's how we get ready for the next stage of our lives, both at work and at home. And I think it was probably 30 minutes to download a lot of viruses back then as well, which hopefully we've got a bit better at too. And people often think kind of, how quick does a web page load? And when you're on kind of any level of relatively good connection through to a gigabit connection, you're not going to notice a web page load anymore slowly or quickly. But it's not just about the web pages. We've just come through COVID. Kids have been learning from home. Parents have been working from home. We've been reliant on the internet to entertain us through all of our many streaming services that come out by direct debit every month. And all that technologies that's kind of come to the fore through COVID seems to still be being used. My kids are still using Google Classroom to do their homework. I'm still working from home. I'm at home today doing this with you. And we're still watching Netflix and Disney and everything else that we signed up to in COVID. And then we think about businesses. A lot of the traffic in businesses, things like email, don't need high bandwidth, and there are businesses out there that probably can operate without a really reliable internet connection. However, for a growing segment of the market, people who are needing to transfer large files, people who've moved their services and their platforms to the cloud in their businesses, businesses with multiple sites where they need to connect those sites together, they're all heavily reliant on really good internet connections. And I've spoken to businesses kind of who create a lot of content where it's easier and quicker for them to courier that content by motorbike on a USB stick than it is to use the internet to transmit that to London or wherever it needs to go, because the quality of their connections just aren't there. And building out full fibre networks is going to solve that. It's also much more reliable. So those businesses who don't need the high bandwidth but do need a connection that works can rely on a low bandwidth connection over fibre a lot more than they can over copper wire. And that's really what ITS is setting out to fix on all of our networks, including our partnership and joint venture with the Liverpool City Region Combined Authority, but on all of our other footprints across the country too.
Yeah, and Lorna, you mentioned, earlier about why it's been important for Liverpool City Region, just thinking about like, those kids who are trying to do work on their laptop. Is there any other reason why this is especially important for Liverpool?
Yes, I mean, there's lots of reasons why it's important. I think innovation is really important for us. We want to create great jobs for the future, and that is reliant on digital, because there's lots of applications now, and AI. We've got lots of innovative ways in which we can deliver and live our lives, I suppose. So I think that's really, really important. But what equally is as important is that we don't leave people behind. So the digital divide, again, exposed during COVID, when we heard about families not being able to access learning for their children because they didn't have access to broadband or to the kit, as well as the connectivity. So I think it's really important for us that everyone can access this. It is a fourth utility. It is so essential now. We know that there's lots of work that's been done by organisations like the Good Things Foundation, who have, they've done lots of evidence-based research to show that people are happier and healthier when they're able to be included online and be able to, just simple things like paying your bills online. That can be a cheaper way. So for families that, shopping online, accessing health advice online. So there's lots of personal benefits, but also lots of business benefits for being able to have good connectivity. So that's why we kind of took charge and wanted to develop our connectivity through our infrastructure partnership with ITS and NGE, so that we know that there's not going to be not spots and areas that are left out in our region that aren't able to get access to good connectivity.
Okay, so I feel like I have a really good grasp about why this is important. So we obviously, Dave, you mentioned before, we've got these copper networks and things like that. Making this switch, is it a really easy thing? Is it just as simple as like pressing a button and now you're full fiber, or how does it go about?
No, absolutely not. We've got to get that fibre into the customer's premises, whether that's a business or a home. So when we build our networks, we build what we call our spine network. So they run down the streets, and along those networks, there's points where we can connect in with bits of fibre. So we can take a piece of fibre from one of those connection points into the customer's premises, and that'll get them up and running on full fibre. We put a piece of kit on the end of it, a bit like you have a router on your copper connection at home. Not too dissimilar, but it can read that signal coming over the fibre. The great thing is, once you put that fibre into your premises, you're future-proof. So we can serve that now with a gigabit connection. We'll be able to serve that customer in the future with a 10 gigabit connection or a 100 gigabit connection, or whatever comes after that as kind of the technology advances and the applications that demand that bandwidth start to be developed as well. It's also, like I said earlier, much more reliable. So while there's a little bit of work required in bringing that connection from the street into the customer's home, it's not something they're going to have to repeat in just a few years. That connection that's coming in is going to serve them in the kind of short and medium term, and be able to be upgraded so that they can continue to kind of grow their requirements on their connection.
So how far along in this process are we?
So in the UK, we're a little bit behind some other countries in the world. We're at about 65% gigabit capable, but that's not all fibre. So some providers have managed to use different technology over their copper infrastructure to do that, but it's still not nearly as reliable. It's still not got as much capacity to carry all of that data as a full fibre connection does. And obviously, like I said earlier, fibre is much less likely to fail because newer technology, much less likely to have faults as well. In the UK, is at about in the 20% of coverage for full fibre at the moment. That's accelerating all the time. There's lots and lots of people building out full fibre networks. And we're building out that infrastructure so people can access it now and in the future. People don't always think they need it yet. And we do have a job in the industry to do to convince people and businesses that fibre is the right thing to do and convince them why it's the right thing to do. And we really want them to see the benefits of how that can help them transform their businesses or their lives at home as well by having that connectivity.
I mean, to put that into context, in our region, when I started this programme, which was in 2018, we had about 4% full fibre coverage in our region. We are now at 30%. So we have moved on somewhat, which is great, but we've still got a long way to go, like Dave said.
Okay, so how can we speed up that process then? Lorna, I'm going to put you back in the hot seat.
Yeah, I mean, I think we are building a backhaul network, which is like the motorway network, and then that will encourage other operators and our joint venture partners to then create the A roads, I suppose, that spin off that and go up to the actual premises. So we've started that process. One way in which we are being innovative and doing this is through our Dig Once policy. So Dig Once is us taking advantage of other capital work programs that we've got across the region. So we could be doing road improvements, we could be doing a housing development, and we want to make sure we're putting digital infrastructure in at the same time as doing that work. And there's lots of benefits for us doing that. One, it's cheaper for us to do it. We're opening the ground up once to put this plastic duct in and fibre into the ground. But it's also environmentally better because, the energy and the effort that goes into doing that work. And it's less disruption. And I think that's a key one. We want to, not be disrupting our roads for our residents and our businesses. So us doing this in a coordinated fashion is a really kind of efficient way of us getting our digital infrastructure into our region.
Absolutely. And I think if I look at what kind of ITS's role in the partnership with the LCRC and NGE is, our job is to kind of put the connections onto the network and get those businesses that want to make those A roads that Lorna talked about and build those A roads. So the network that we're building and the networks that ITS always build are open access wholesale networks. So sometimes someone will turn up in your area and build a network and you can only buy from them, and they have a bit of a monopoly on that area for fibre. One of the ways that ITS kind of differ is we'll work on a wholesale basis. We'll work with partners who can use our infrastructure to underpin their services. So if I look in the business market, it might be a business who's doing IT support. They may be doing voice over IP. They may be doing various other business services. They can piece all of that together using the LCR connectivity underneath that to underpin the solution. But the business, the customer, they can choose from many partners. We've got over 300 partners who can sell on our network footprint. From a residential point of view, one of our big partners is a company called the Fourth Utility, who do residential broadband into apartment blocks, basically. And we connect those apartment blocks to the internet for them all over the country, including in LCR, so that the residents of those homes can access better connectivity. And they have specific tariffs for digital inclusion, coming back to Lorna's point earlier around making sure that those people who do need access to connectivity to access services can do. Some of our partners do have kind of tariffs and packages to promote that social inclusion as well.
I think that's a really interesting idea to kind of elaborate a little bit more about, because obviously, everyone wants to have digital connection, but it's so important we don't leave anyone behind in that. So how are we tackling that, other than the digital tariffs, which you just mentioned?
I mean, I think there's three reasons why people aren't connected, and we know about 23% of households in our region were kind of what we class as e-withdrawn, so hadn't accessed the internet in the last 3 months. I think motivation is one of them. Why do I need to access the internet? What's in it for me? I think cybersecurity is also a fear for some people, so making sure that they can do it safely. So helping kind of encourage people to use it, but use it in a safe manner is really important. So we've got a number of programs. We work with community and voluntary sector to put that support in place. Skills is another one, digital skills. 1 in 5 people in our region don't have the digital skills. So I think a lot of our providers are, out there and again, building them relationships and building that trust with people to come forward and to get access to that training is really, really important. But I think affordability is another big area. So like Dave mentioned around the social tariffs and making it more affordable, I think us having open access networks increases competition, increases choice, drives down price. So it's really important part of our network that it is open access, and we can offer a range of different products that would be more accessible for some of our residents across the region.
Absolutely. One of the other things I've seen certain providers do in the residential space, certainly in kind of maybe in social housing or other situations where it's needed, is offer a 30-day contract rather than a 12 or an 18-month contract. One of our partners has had feedback from customers. Actually, some months they may need to choose that they spend their money on something else, and they don't want to be tied to a 12, an 18, a 24-month contract, which a lot of the market does deliver to customers, and a 30-day rolling tariff that they can kind of switch on and off as they need it, as they can demand it, and when they want to have it, has been quite popular for them. It's been something that customers have told them they really like.
And I mean, just to add as well, as part of our social value in terms of the contract that we have with our partners, we are introducing some community Wi-Fi hubs. So we're working with some community organisations to put in connectivity, and the beneficiaries of that who use that community facility and in that area will be able to get access to connectivity through that as well.
Absolutely. We've talked a lot about residential homes there, which is really, really important, and it is important we get people better connectivity. But to attract the right businesses to any region, including the Liverpool City region, you need to make sure we've got the right connectivity for businesses as well. And historically, businesses have been underserved. They've been able to get really expensive business grade connections, but not necessarily always been able to access lower value connections at the right speed, the right quality, or the right level of service support that they need to kind of underpin their business with that connectivity. And that's something we're changing through the build out of LCR Connect. We're making those services, the high grade services, more affordable than through the incumbents, but also making sure that those businesses can access kind of a lower tier of products that maybe, if you're running a really small business and cash flow's tight, you might not want to spend £200 on the best internet connection, but you do need something reliable. People are trading more online. E-commerce is absolutely important, and if you've not got that, you're not trading in the right marketplaces, certainly coming out of COVID and even before that. So we're aiming to make sure that those businesses can access the connectivity they need through our network partners at the right price, at the right service level, to help them grow their business in the Liverpool City region. And then lastly, on that front, as people build more data centres and more kind of critical network infrastructure in the Liverpool City region, they'll need access to this kind of super highway that we're building, this motorway, as Lorna put it, to take their data back to where it needs to go. We're really lucky in the Liverpool City region that we've got the landing station for one of the transatlantic cables comes in Southport. The Liverpool LCR Connect network connects into that landing station in Southport, and we can take traffic all the way across the UK to all the main data centre hubs in Manchester, in Milton Keynes, in London through our network, which is really, really important for those ultra high bandwidth businesses that need to access traffic across the Atlantic.
Do you find that that's something that people come up to you like early on when they're building a new office building? They're like, we need to have fast internet connection. It's a requirement now for tenants.
Yeah, absolutely. They do. They want to walk in working wherever possible as well. They want to know they can turn that on quickly. So when you take a new space as a business, your water's on, your gas is on, your electricity's on. And historically, it's kind of 90 days to get an internet connection in, but it's realistically the one thing you need to be able to do business. So definitely businesses and are demanding that. And I think the property sector needs to make sure that they're providing that and working with telecoms industry to make sure those services are provided and ready to go in their buildings. In terms of those ultra high speed connections across the country for data centres, they're pretty niche. But in that particular market, yes, there are people that want that kind of connectivity, and they want it in the Liverpool City region. And certainly having the infrastructure available is a way the City region can attract more data centres to set up in the areas. We're speaking to a couple who are kind of building now and putting more data centre infrastructure into the region.
Okay, I have to say I really enjoyed all the imagery that's been going into place. I feel like I actually really do have a good grasp on it. That motorway, Lorna, that was excellent, top notch. Really have like a visualization of that. We've talked a little bit about obviously business connections, but Lorna, you mentioned earlier that you want to get in while we're doing construction work, while things are happening on a site. So how early should we be discussing digital infrastructure when we're doing developments?
I mean, as early as possible, I would say, at the design phase, and that's where we're getting to now with a lot of the developments that we deliver with our local authority partners. We're getting in really early. We know what our spec is. We know what we need to put in, and I think the earlier you get it into the designs, the better. So you're costing it into that big program of works at the earliest stage is definitely what we would advise. So we want that policy to be adopted by all of our partners as well, so that we're building our infrastructure for the future at the very start.
Yeah, and certainly if someone, developers redeveloping an area, even just, demolishing one building and building another, the earlier they think about that requirement for connectivity can help them attract tenants as well. So if you get in at the right stage, we can look at what's called resilient options. So we can bring two different internet feeds in from two different sides of the building. So if a business really does rely upon that internet connectivity to trade, they'd be interested in that. And that would be a decision-making factor for them in the space that they would choose. And we can do clever things like use somebody else's network for one of those connections, as well as bring it in at a different end of the building. Certainly some of the tech businesses that are out there, they wouldn't take a space that doesn't have those kind of options in case one of those connections gets damaged, someone puts a JCB through it while repairing a gas main, or there's just a fault on it, and we can design all of that stuff in if we're kind of engaged at the earliest stage in that development process.
What about when it comes to areas that aren't having major works done to them? How can you ensure that this work's not incredibly disruptive for the people living nearby?
So one of the things we do, two of the things we do, the first one Lorna mentioned earlier, which is the dig once policy, which the LCR have adopted, which is great. We are seeing other councils adopt those kind of policies, but I think one of the better implementations of it I've seen is on this project. Wherever possible, though, as ITS, we try and reuse infrastructure so that we don't have to dig up the roads. We know it disrupts people's lives, and the last thing you want to do when you want to provide connections to businesses or homes is disrupt them before they can buy that service from you, because it leaves them with a bit of a sour taste. So wherever possible, we'll reuse infrastructure. And we've got examples where we've done that in 3 different ways. So the first way we do that through Openreach's physical infrastructure access product, which is Ofcom worked with Openreach a few years ago and said, you're the national incumbent, your network was built with public money in the main, you need to make sure that your infrastructure is available to other operators to help us accelerate this rollout of fibre optic broadband and fibre optic connectivity across the country. So we are licensed and established to use Openreach's infrastructure to pull our cables through. So it's all brand new infrastructure. We just pull it through their duct network, their kind of holes and poles, as some people in the industry put it. Others we've done, we've worked with tramway networks to use their trackside ducts to pull our fibre through, and we've kind of got concession agreements with tramway networks, and in some instances we've used council-owned ducts as well. Some councils have networks of CCTV duct and various other things, and again we've arranged concessions to use those ducts to make sure that wherever possible we don't have to dig, and digging is a last resort. That said, we're putting infrastructure under the ground, and sometimes there's nobody else's hole there to pull that cable through, and we do have to dig, but we just aim to keep that to an absolute minimum wherever we possibly can.
Now, one of the things that came up, Lorna, you mentioned that one of the obstacles for people when it comes to accessing the internet and being, more digitally connected is a lack of skills. And then Dave, you were talking about how this can be used to attract businesses, and I'm feeling like a little synergy here about skills and companies. Am I on the right wavelength there?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's not just residents that we're trying to attract for our kinds of digital skills. It's businesses as well, because it can unlock so many productivity gains when businesses are digitally enabled. So, we've got a lot of SMEs in our patch, and we offer digital training to them as well in their workforces. So I think there is a big focus on upskilling across the board, really, both for businesses and individuals as well, who just want to use the internet for kind of leisure, retail, and accessing services. So yes, there's lots of focus. We've got digital boot camps. We work with lots of our partners and our providers to make sure that we've got a whole range of different skills on offer, digital skills training on offer.
How big is LCR Connect? How many miles of cable are we talking about? How expensive it is? Is it like a 30 million year project? What's going on?
So the joint with 3 joint venture partners. So there's the LCRCA, there's ourselves at ITS Technology Group, and there is NGE, a French civils engineering company. We've each put some money into the venture. The total value of that investment is £30 million, and with that £30 million, we'll be building a 212 kilometre fibre spine around the region. So that basically means we're building that motorway that Lorna talked about earlier. So we've taken that through so it's got access to the densest parts of the residential and business communities right throughout all 6 boroughs of the Liverpool City Region, so all the way from from Southport in the west through to Halton in the east, and making sure that fibre is available within all of those areas. In terms of the length of the project, we're aiming to deploy that fibre within 2 years into the ground and make sure that that's all up and running and available for businesses to access. As you'll imagine, with a network that long, it'll come online in sections. It won't all be kind of a big bang turn on right across the whole region. And some sections are live now and able to take customer traffic. Others will be released as we kind of get through the next few months. Don't know if you want to add anything to that, Lorna. Hopefully I've done a good job.
No, you have perfect. I mean, yeah, I think our ambition was this is kind of our first phase, get the backhaul network in, and then we can see what we need to build off it from there. But I think, getting to this point, it was a challenging project, and we had to navigate our way around a market that we as the combined authority weren't specialists in. But that's why we brought on board our partners who bring that specialist expertise to help us realise what our ambitions are really, which is to kind of be a leader in terms of digital connectivity. So any businesses, investors that want to come here know that we've got the right infrastructure, we've invested in it, it's future proofed, we've got enough capacity to last us at least 20, 30 years, so that they can be assured they can grow their business and to exploit that digital technology.
Absolutely. And because we're building an open access infrastructure, if any of those other providers want to come to us and say, hey, can I use your network to get to the bit I want to build, and I'll fill in some of those gaps in between the spines, then we're really open to that. We're not saying this is ours and you can't get on it and you're not allowed. It's open to anybody who wants to access it, and we've got a commercial rate card, etc. But the objective is absolutely about bringing better connectivity to every home and business in the Liverpool City region as a long-term objective.
All right, to sum up what we've learned today then, full fiber is what we need to make sure we can have the fastest internet connection imaginable. And it's really critical that we start doing this now because the current infrastructure is copper-based and it just can't handle the demands of modern-day users. Liverpool City Region is ahead of the curve and partnering up with ITS and NGE to transform the region, build up connectivity, and future-proof the digital connections of the future. Also, we can build this infrastructure in a way that isn't very disruptive if we just incorporate it into the early stages of development, which is what Liverpool's doing. What is more important, we need to make sure everyone in the community is on the same page, which means educating people on what these connections mean, why they matter, and then helping them get the skills they need to make the most out of these opportunities. Is there anything I missed, guys, or did I cover it all?
No, I think that's great. Yeah, great summary. Yes.
Do you want to go?
Crushing it. Well, Lorna, Dave, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast. And thank you, the listener, for listening in. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to learn more about the built environment, be sure to subscribe to Place Northwest podcast series, which you can find wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm Julia Hatmaker. Thanks for listening.